The war had broken us. I still remember the day our sky turned red, not from our twin suns, but from the plasma fires that rained down like judgment itself. The Krell Dominion had finally come for us, and we, the Threnodi, had nothing left to give. Our shields failed, our weapons melted, our people ran. And then, we ran out of places to run to. My name is Veshin, and I was what you might call a diplomatic courier. Not a soldier, not a leader. Just someone who carried messages between frightened councils while our civilization crumbled around us. When the evacuation order came, I found myself on a transport ship with 3,000 other souls, all of us staring at screens showing our homeworld splitting apart like overripe fruit. The Krell didn't just conquer. They consumed. They took worlds and stripped them down to the bedrock, harvesting everything from minerals to atmosphere, leaving nothing but dead rocks spinning in empty space. 17 species had already fallen to them. We were number 18, but we weren't the last ones running. Our fleet, if you could call it that, consisted of 47 civilian ships held together by desperation and prayers to gods we weren't sure were listening anymore. We had fuel for maybe 6 more jumps, food for 3 months, hope for considerably less than that. Captain Morveth stood on the bridge of the lead vessel, her face looking like someone had carved it from stone and forgotten to add the part that knew how to smile. "We need a world," she announced to the gathered representatives on the holoconference. "Any world. I don't care if it's a gas giant with a floating platform or an asteroid with a breathable dome. We need ground beneath our feet and walls around us, or we won't survive to see another season." That's when someone mentioned Earth. The room went quiet. Earth. The human homeworld. We'd heard of them, of course. Everybody had. They were the new kids in the galactic neighborhood, only having achieved faster-than-light travel about 200 years ago. Young, aggressive, unpredictable. They had this annoying habit of treating warfare like some kind of performance art, always doing the unexpected, always pushing boundaries that more civilized species had agreed were probably best left alone. They also had a reputation for being emotional, irrational, dangerous when provoked. The Galactic Council had admitted them provisionally, mostly because nobody wanted to find out what would happen if they were told no. "Absolutely not," said Councillor Thex, his gills fluttering nervously. "Humans are unstable. Requesting aid from them would be like asking a supernova for a nightlight." "We don't have other options," Morveth replied coldly. "Unless you've got a secret planet hidden in your left pocket, we contact Earth or we die in space. Those are our choices." More silence, the kind that tastes like ash. "Fine," Thex muttered. "Send the message. But don't be surprised when they tell us to get lost." I was assigned to draft the request. Me, the courier who couldn't even keep his own family safe. I sat there for 3 hours, staring at a blank screen, trying to figure out how to beg without sounding pathetic, how to ask for help without promising things we couldn't deliver, how to convince a species we barely knew to care about our survival. In the end, I kept it simple. To Earth and humanity, we are the Threnodi. We are 3,000 survivors of a dead world. The Krell Dominion pursues us. We have nowhere else to go. We ask not for soldiers or salvation, only for shelter until we can determine our next path. We offer what little we have in exchange. We understand if you refuse. We would not blame you. I hit send and waited for rejection. It came 6 hours later. Not the rejection, the response. "Come," it said. Just that one word, followed by coordinates and a timestamp. No conditions, no negotiations, no demands for payment or servitude or genetic samples, or any of the 1,000 things species usually wanted when approached by refugees. Just come. We didn't trust it. Of course we didn't. It smelled like a trap, like bait dangling in front of desperate prey. But Morveth made the call anyway, because when you're drowning, you don't question the hand that reaches down to you. The jump to Earth system took 2 days. We came out of faster than light near a moon called Luna, and immediately found ourselves surrounded by 70 warships, each one bristling with enough firepower to crack a moon. My survival instincts screamed. This was it. We'd jumped from one disaster into another. The humans were going to vaporize us, and honestly, at least it would be quick. Instead, a voice crackled over the communication system. Female, young-sounding, almost cheerful, which was somehow more terrifying than threats would have been. Threnodi Fleet. This is Lieutenant Kira Hayes of the Earth Defense Force. Welcome to Sol System. Please maintain your current trajectory and velocity. We're establishing an escort formation. Don't be alarmed by the guns. We're just making sure nobody follows you home. Home. She said home like we belonged there. The warships moved into position around us, not as jailers, but as guardians. They flew in perfect formation, creating a defensive sphere around our ragtag collection of damaged vessels. I watched through the viewport as Earth came into view, that blue and white marble hanging in space like a jewel some careless god had dropped into the void. It was beautiful, painfully beautiful. We're being hailed, the communications officer announced. It's from the surface. Someone called. Let me get this right. General Marcus Webb. He's requesting a direct line to Captain Morveth. Morveth straightened her uniform, squared her shoulders, and nodded. The holographic display flickered to life, and suddenly we were looking at a human. He was older, with hair gone silver, and a face that had seen too many battles. But his eyes were kind, tired, but kind. Captain Morveth, he said, and his voice carried the weight of someone who'd given orders that cost lives and still managed to sleep at night. I'm General Webb. I'll be coordinating your arrival and settlement. We've prepared landing sites in North America, specifically in a region we call Montana. Wide open spaces, clean air, low population density. We figured you'd want room to breathe after being cooped up in those ships. Morveth opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. General, we don't understand. Why are you doing this? We have nothing to offer you. We're refugees, not allies. We can't fight for you. We can't pay you. We're just… Tired? Webb interrupted gently. Scared? Running from something that wants you dead? Yeah, Captain. We know how that feels. Humanity's been there, more times than we like to admit. He leaned forward. You asked for shelter. We're giving it. No strings, no contracts, no catch. You need ground and walls and time to figure out what comes next. We've got all three in abundance. But the Krell, Morveth pressed. They'll come for us. They'll come here. Something changed in Webb's expression. The kindness remained, but underneath it, something colder appeared. Something that reminded me why humans had a reputation for being dangerous. Let them come, he said quietly. We'll be waiting. The landing took 6 hours. 6 hours of descending through atmosphere while human pilots flew alongside us, guiding us down like shepherds with a flock. The ships touched down in a valley surrounded by mountains, and when the doors opened, the first thing that hit us was the smell. Fresh air. Real air, not recycled and filtered and pumped through systems that were held together with improvised repairs. Air that smelled like plants and earth and water. I stepped off the transport, and my legs nearly gave out. Not from weakness, but from relief. Solid ground. Real, actual, solid ground. that wasn't going to explode or collapse or get yanked out from under us. Humans were everywhere. They'd set up temporary structures, medical stations, food distribution centers, sanitation facilities. They moved with purpose and efficiency, but also with something else. Compassion, maybe. Or just basic decency. They helped our elderly. They carried our children. They smiled at us like we were guests instead of burdens. A woman approached me. She was young, maybe mid-20s in human years, with dark skin and hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her uniform said, Corporal Amara Johnson, Medical Corps. "Hi there," she said, and her smile was genuine. "You look like you could use some water and a place to sit down. Come on, let's get you processed and settled. We've got hot food, clean beds, and enough antibiotics to choke a horse. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out." "Why?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "Why are you helping us?" Amara's smile faded slightly, replaced by something more serious. "Because someone should," she said simply. "Because you asked, and we could. Because leaving people to die when you have the power to save them is a choice, and we chose differently." She paused. "Also, and I'm going to be real with you here, a lot of us humans have read enough history to know what happens when refugees get turned away. It never ends well. So we figured, maybe this time we'd be the good guys in that story." She led me to a tent where other Threnodi were being examined by human doctors. They were gentle, careful, asking permission before every touch. One of them was examining a child who'd been injured during our escape, and I heard him murmur, "Hey buddy, you're going to be just fine. We're going to fix you right up, okay? You're safe now." Safe? That word felt foreign in my mouth. The days that followed were surreal. Humans built us temporary housing that quickly became permanent settlements. They brought supplies, technology, resources. They taught us how to grow crops in Earth's soil. They shared medical knowledge. They helped us establish communications with other surviving Threnodi scattered across the galaxy. But more than that, they prepared. I saw it happening, watched as military units rotated through our settlement, not to intimidate us, but to familiarize themselves with the terrain. Watched as defensive emplacements went up on the mountains surrounding our valley. Watched as human engineers reinforced structures and built shield generators and installed weapon systems that made our old planetary defenses look like children's toys. General Webb visited often. He walked through our settlement, talked to our people, learned our names. One evening, I found him standing on a ridge overlooking the valley, staring up at the stars. "They're coming," I said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," he replied without looking at me. "Our deep space sensors picked up Krell's scout ships 2 days ago. They're tracking debris from your jump trail. They'll find us eventually." My blood went cold. "You should evacuate us. Send us somewhere else. We've brought death to your doorstep." Now Webb looked at me, and there was something fierce in his expression. "Veshin, right? We've got this old saying, you don't get to choose your family, but you defend them anyway. The moment you set foot on Earth, you became our problem to solve. Not your problem, ours. And we don't run from our problems. But your people will fight," he interrupted firmly. "Because that's what we do. We've been fighting since we climbed down from the trees. We fought each other for thousands of years until we finally got smart enough to realize we were better together. Now we fight for each other. And as of 2 weeks ago, that includes you." He turned back to the stars. "The Krell think they're apex predators. They think they're unstoppable. They've crushed 17 civilizations, and they're coming for their 18th. His voice dropped to something almost conversational. "They haven't met us yet. Not really. They're about to learn a very important lesson about humanity." "What lesson?" I asked. Webb smiled, And it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd seen the worst the universe had to offer and decided to smile anyway, just to spite it. That we're the monsters who protect the innocent from the other monsters. 3 weeks later, the Krell arrived. The alarm started at dawn, which I would later learn was typical human irony. Nothing like an existential threat to ruin your morning coffee. As Corporal Johnson had joked when she rushed past my quarters, already suited up in combat armor that made her look twice her size. I ran to the observation platform where dozens of Threnodi had gathered, all of us staring up at the sky with that special kind of terror reserved for prey animals who know the predator has arrived. The Krell fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right at the edge of the system. And even from here, even through the planetary shielding and atmospheric distortion, we could see them. 40 vessels. Each one the size of a small city. Each one designed for a single purpose: total annihilation. "Get to the shelters," a human soldier ordered, his voice amplified through speakers across the settlement. "This is not a drill. All civilians to designated safe zones immediately." But I didn't move, couldn't move. I'd seen this before, watched it happen to my own world. The Krell would establish orbital superiority, then rain fire until nothing remained but scorched earth and screaming. No defense had ever stopped them. No resistance had ever slowed them down. Except the humans weren't running. Instead, they were launching. Ships rose from Earth by the hundreds, streaking up through the atmosphere like reverse meteorites. Not just military vessels, but everything. Cargo, haulers retrofitted with weapons. Civilian craft with pilots who'd volunteered for what everyone knew was likely a one-way trip. Mining ships, exploration vessels, even what looked like a luxury yacht with missiles strapped to its hull. It was magnificent. It was insane. It was the most human thing I'd ever witnessed. "Sir, you really need to get to shelter," another voice said. I turned to find Lieutenant Hayes, the same woman who'd welcomed us weeks ago. She looked different now, harder somehow, like she'd put on armor that went deeper than the military-grade plating covering her body. "You're all going to die," I said numbly. "The Krell don't lose. They've never lost." Hayes checked her rifle, methodical and calm. "Yeah, well, there's a first time for everything." She looked up at the sky, where the battle was about to begin. "Besides, we've got something the Krell don't." "What's that?" "A reason to win." She jogged off toward a transport that would take her up to one of the orbital defense platforms, leaving me standing there feeling useless and terrified and somehow, impossibly, a tiny bit hopeful. The first shots fired before I made it to the shelter. I heard them more than saw them. Massive booms that rattled through the air like thunder had learned to scream. The Krell opened with their standard doctrine: overwhelming firepower designed to shatter morale before the real fighting even started. Plasma lances the size of skyscrapers speared toward Earth, each one carrying enough energy to boil oceans. The human shields absorbed them, flickered, strained, held. Then humanity fired back. I'd studied human military history during the voyage here, trying to understand the species that had so casually offered us sanctuary. I'd read about their wars, their weapons, their tactics. Humans fought dirty. They didn't believe in fair fights or honorable combat. They believed in winning. Consequences be damned. The Krell were about to get a comprehensive education. Human vessels swarmed the enemy fleet, like insects, attacking something much larger. But these insects had teeth. They didn't try to match the Krell in firepower. Instead, they darted and weaved, targeting weak points, communication arrays, engine clusters. One human destroyer deliberately rammed a Krell cruiser, its captain broadcasting defiance right up until the moment both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up space like a newborn star. "Alpha Wing, break left and target those portside weapons." Bravo Wing, with me, we're going for their flagship's engines. And someone, please tell me why there's a civilian freighter trying to headbutt a dreadnought. The communications chatter was chaos, but organized chaos, controlled madness. Humans didn't fight in neat formations or follow rigid battle plans. They adapted, improvised, turned every disadvantage into an opportunity. A Krell heavy destroyer broke through the initial defensive line, accelerating toward Earth's atmosphere. Targeting scanners locked onto our settlement. This was it. This was how we died, watching history repeat itself while our human protectors fought and failed above us. Except something rose to meet the destroyer. No, not something. Someone. General Webb's flagship, the Valiant, positioned itself directly between the Krell vessel and Earth. A ship 1/10 the size, facing down a monster that could crack it in half with a single volley. The destroyer fired. Webb's ship took the hit on forward shields that blazed so bright I had to look away. When I looked back, the Valiant was still there, still flying, and Webb's voice came through on the open channel. You want them? You go through us, first. The Valiant opened fire with everything it had. Railguns that could punch through a mountain. Missiles that tracked their targets through dimensions humans hadn't even fully mapped yet. Energy weapons that had been declared too dangerous for conventional warfare, but apparently someone forgot to mention that to Webb. The Krell destroyer shuddered under the assault, its shields collapsing in sections, atmosphere venting from breached hull sections. Then 6 more human ships arrived, flanking the enemy vessel, pouring fire into it from every angle until the destroyer simply came apart, breaking into chunks of molten metal that burned up in Earth's atmosphere like the world's most expensive fireworks display. This is Webb, to all units. The general's voice rang out, steady despite the chaos. They wanted a fight. Let's give them one they'll tell horror stories about. The battle raged for 6 hours. 6 hours of watching impossibility become reality. The Krell, who had never lost, were losing. Not because humanity had better ships or superior firepower, but because humans fought like people who had nothing left to lose and everything worth protecting. They used tactics no sane military would attempt. One squadron deliberately allowed themselves to be captured by a Krell tractor beam, then detonated their reactor cores simultaneously, taking out the cruiser's primary weapons array. A wing of fighters flew directly into a plasma storm generated by overlapping Krell fire, using the interference to mask their approach before striking at point-blank range. Corporal Johnson's voice came through the settlement speakers, breathless but alive. Ground forces, be advised. Enemy landing craft attempting atmospheric entry in Sector 7. Repeat, we have incoming. My heart sank. Of course. The Krell always sent ground troops when orbital bombardment failed. They'd land, establish a beachhead, and butcher everyone within reach. I'd seen it happen, watched it happen, survived it once through sheer luck, and wouldn't survive it again. Human soldiers were already moving, taking positions around the settlement, not in front of it, around it, creating a perimeter that put themselves between us and whatever was coming down from orbit. The landing craft hit hard, crashing into the valley floor with impacts that shook the ground. Ramps dropped. Krell warriors emerged, 3-meter-tall nightmares covered in bio-armor and carrying weapons designed to liquefy organic matter. There were hundreds of them, more than enough to overwhelm any defense. They charged. Humans met them with gunfire and grenades, and something that might have been laughter, though it sounded more like madness wearing a smile. The Krell were bigger, stronger, better armed. None of it mattered. Humans fought with a ferocity that bordered on suicidal, throwing themselves at the enemy with complete disregard for their own survival, as long as it meant protecting the refugees behind them. I watched a soldier take a plasma blast to the chest that should have killed him instantly. He stayed on his feet long enough to empty his weapon into the Krell warrior who'd shot him, then collapsed only after confirming the kill. I watched another use herself as bait, drawing 3 Krell into a prepared ambush where her squad mates cut them down. I watched humans die, and keep fighting, and die again, and somehow it still wasn't enough to break them. Then the reinforcements arrived. Not human reinforcements, Threnodi reinforcements. My people, refugees who'd been running for weeks, suddenly stopped running. They emerged from shelters carrying whatever weapons they could find, human rifles and improvised clubs, and in one case, a cooking pot that someone wielded with surprising effectiveness. We weren't soldiers. We weren't warriors. But we were tired of being victims, and the humans had shown us that sometimes being brave is just being too angry to stay scared. I found myself grabbing a fallen rifle, checking it the way Corporal Johnson had taught me during those integration sessions that I'd thought were just busy work. The safety was off. The magazine was half full. Good enough. A Krell warrior spotted me, turned, raised its weapon. I fired first. The recoil nearly broke my shoulder, but the plasma round hit center mass, dropping the creature before it could return fire. I stared at it, stunned. Little Veshin, the courier who couldn't save his own family. Amara appeared beside me, her medical insignia splattered with blood that wasn't entirely hers. "Not bad for a first-timer," she shouted over the gunfire. "Want to try for 2? Together, we fought. Human and Threnodi, soldier and refugee, people who'd been strangers weeks ago and were now allies in survival. The Krell, who'd spent centuries crushing civilizations, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to break, refused to run, refused to do anything except fight harder every time they got knocked down. The battle on the ground lasted another 2 hours. When it finally ended, when the last Krell warrior fell and the last enemy ship retreated into faster-than-light travel, the valley was silent, except for the sound of people breathing hard and trying to remember how to stop being weapons. We'd won. Against all logic, all precedent, all reason, we'd actually won. I found General Webb near the command post, his uniform torn and bloody, but his expression calm, almost peaceful. He was looking up at the sky, where debris from the battle still burned in orbit, temporary stars marking where ships had died. 17 civilizations, I said quietly. The Krell destroyed 17 civilizations before us. None of them survived. Why did we? Webb turned to me, and for the first time, he looked tired. Not defeated, just tired. "Because you asked for help," he said simply. "And we were here to give it." He paused, considering his words. "Also, and I probably shouldn't admit this, humans are really bad at knowing when to quit. We see something that says impossible, and we take it as a personal challenge." Around us, medics were treating the wounded, human, and Threnodi side by side. Engineers were already surveying damage and planning repairs. Someone had started cooking food, because apparently even after a battle for survival, humans still needed to eat and wanted everyone else fed too. Captain Morveth approached, limping but alive. She'd fought too, I learned later. Led a defense of the southern perimeter with nothing but a sidearm and absolute refusal to let her people die. She saluted Webb, who returned it with more formality than I'd seen from him before. "General," she said, her voice rough with emotion, "we owe you a debt we can never repay." "You don't owe us anything," Webb replied. "You asked for shelter. We gave it. You helped defend it when it mattered. That makes us even in my book." "But your people died," Morveth pressed. "For us. Humans died protecting refugees they barely knew." Webb's expression softened. "Yeah, they did. And every single one of them volunteered, knowing that might happen. You know why? He gestured at the settlement, at the Threnodi, and humans working together to clean up the aftermath. Because that's what we do. We protect people who can't protect themselves. We stand between the monsters and the innocent. We fight battles that aren't ours because somebody has to, and we decided a long time ago that it might as well be us. He smiled, and this time it wasn't fierce or frightening. It was just tired and sad, and somehow still kind. Besides, you're not refugees anymore. You're residents. This is your home now, if you want it. And humans defend their homes. 3 months later, I stood in the same valley, watching construction crews build permanent housing. Real homes, not temporary shelters. Structures meant to last generations. The Threnodi settlement had expanded, grown, become something more than just a refugee camp. We had schools now, built by human architects working with Threnodi engineers. We had farms, hospitals, community centers. We had a future. The Krell never came back. Word spread through the galaxy about what happened at Earth. How humanity had taken in refugees and then defended them against impossible odds. Other species facing the Krell dominion started reaching out, asking for help, for shelter, for hope. And humanity, being humanity, said yes. Every single time. I found Corporal Johnson, now Sergeant Johnson after her promotion, helping install a new playground near the school. She saw me and waved, grinning. Hey, Veshin. Come to help or just supervise? Neither, I admitted. I came to say thank you. Again. For the 100th time, she laughed. And I'll tell you for the 100th time, you don't need to thank us. We did what anyone should do. She paused, then added more seriously, though not everyone would have fought back like you all did. That took guts. We learned from the best, I said. You showed us that running isn't the only option, that sometimes you stand and fight. Yeah, well, she returned to tightening bolts on the swing set. Sometimes the scariest thing you can do is stop being afraid. Humans figured that out a long time ago. Glad we could pass the lesson along. That night, I stood outside my new home, looking up at the stars. They didn't seem as threatening anymore. The universe was still dangerous, still full of species like the Krell who wanted nothing but destruction. But it was also full of humans, and that made all the difference. We'd asked Earth for shelter. Humanity built us a home and stood guard while we learned to stop running. They'd shown us that kindness wasn't weakness, that compassion could coexist with strength, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was help someone who couldn't help themselves. The Threnodi had been the 18th species targeted by the Krell Dominion, but we weren't the 18th to fall. We were the first to survive. And we survived because humanity decided that one small word, come, was more powerful than all the weapons in the galaxy. Inside my home, my family was waiting. My family that I'd thought I'd lost, but had found again, among the other survivors. We'd been broken, scattered, desperate. Now we were healing. Now we were whole. Now we were home. Tomorrow, I'd start my new job working with the Human Integration Office, helping other refugee species find their footing on Earth. There would be more coming, I knew. More people running from horrors they couldn't fight alone. And humanity would welcome them, just like they'd welcomed us. Because that's what humans did. They saw people in need and helped. They saw injustice and fought it. They saw the impossible and treated it like an invitation. We'd asked for shelter, they'd given us everything, and in return, we'd given them something too. We'd given them the chance to be heroes, to prove that in a universe full of darkness, there were still lights bright enough to push back the shadows. I went inside, closed the door behind me, and for the first time, in longer than I could remember, I felt safe. The stars could wait. For now, I was home.